Part 1. The research vessel Serene Mind drifted through the empty space between stars. It was a large ship, built for science rather than war, and it carried beings from 12 different worlds. They had come together for one purpose: to find a cure for the sickness that was killing the galaxy. Doctor stood in her laboratory and stared at the data on her screen. The numbers told the same story they had told for the past 40 cycles. Nothing worked. No medicine. No therapy. No treatment of any kind. The void melancholy continued to spread, and she had no way to stop it. The sickness was not like other diseases. It did not attack the body. It attacked the mind. Beings who caught it lost the ability to feel joy. They lost hope. They stopped eating and sleeping and caring about anything at all. Some simply gave up and let themselves fade away. Others continued to exist, but they were empty inside, like shells with nothing living within them. Had studied the condition for most of her adult life. She was considered the greatest expert on mental health in the entire Galactic Health Coalition. But expertise meant nothing when every treatment failed. She had tried chemicals that adjusted brain function. She had tried machines that stimulated pleasure centers. She had tried group therapy, isolation therapy, light therapy, and sound therapy. Nothing made any real difference. The disease had started small, appearing on a few distant worlds. Now it had spread to every corner of civilized space. Entire species were affected. They had not experienced positive emotion in 3 generations. The crystalline minds of Theta 9 had begun to shut down, one by one, their logical brains unable to process the despair that had infected them. Even the telepathic communion of, who shared one mind across millions of bodies, had fractured into isolated pieces, each too sad to connect with the others. Closed her eyes and let out a long breath. She was tired, not just physically tired, but tired in her soul. Sometimes she wondered if she was beginning to catch the void melancholy herself. A knock at her door interrupted her dark thoughts. She opened it to find standing in the hallway was a junior researcher, young and eager, with bright eyes and quick movements. She came from a small world called, where the people were known for their curiosity and their tendency to find interesting things in unexpected places. Doctor said, "I need to show you something." Wanted to say no. She wanted to go to her quarters and sleep for 100 years. But there was something in his voice that made her pause. The young researcher sounded excited, which was rare these days. "What is it?" asked. "I'm not sure how to explain it. You need to see for yourself." Followed down the corridor to the signal analysis lab. This was where researchers studied broadcasts from primitive worlds, the ones that had not yet discovered faster-than-light travel. The Coalition kept these worlds under observation, but did not contact them. It was considered too dangerous to introduce advanced technology to species that were not ready for it. Sat down at her workstation and pulled up a file. I was cataloging signals from a quarantined planet in the Sol system. The inhabitants call it Earth. Nodded. She knew about Earth. The humans were a young species, barely out of their industrial age. They had only recently begun to explore their own solar system. They were considered unremarkable by galactic standards. I found a large archive of visual recordings, continued. The humans store them on a network they call the Internet. This particular collection is from a site called YouTube. "What kind of recordings?" asked. Hesitated. "Small animals. The humans call them puppies. They are the young of a domesticated species that lives with them." Felt a flash of irritation. "You called me here to look at recordings of alien pets." "Please," said, "just watch." She pressed a button, and the screen came to life. Saw a small creature with soft fur and large dark eyes. It had floppy ears and a tail that moved back and forth rapidly. It was trying to climb over a barrier, but its legs were too short. It kept falling and getting up and trying again. Its movements were clumsy and uncoordinated. It made high-pitched sounds that seemed to express confusion and determination at the same time. Watched, she did not know what to say. The recording continued. More puppies appeared. Some were playing with each other, tumbling and rolling and nipping at ears. Some were sleeping in piles, their small bodies pressed together for warmth. Some were running toward human beings with obvious joy, their entire bodies wiggling with excitement. Something strange happened inside's chest. A tightness she had not known was there began to loosen. The corners of her mouth pulled upward in an expression she had not made in years. She felt warmth spreading through her body, starting in her core and moving outward to her limbs. "What is this?" she whispered. "I don't know," said, "but look at my biometric readings from when I first watched these recordings." She pulled up a chart, saw the data and could not believe it. Serotonin had increased by 300%. Her stress hormones had dropped to nearly zero. Her brain activity had shifted from patterns associated with depression to patterns associated with joy. "This is impossible," said. "That's what I thought, so I showed the recordings to others on the ship." Opened another file. This one contained biometric data from a dozen different species. Crystalline minds, members of the communion of beings who had shown no response to any treatment for void melancholy. Every single one of them had improved after watching the puppy recordings. His hands began to shake. She sat down heavily in a chair and stared at the data. This could not be real. It was too simple, too strange. The greatest minds in the galaxy had worked for decades to find a cure for void melancholy, and the answer was recordings of small furry animals from a primitive planet. "There must be an error," she said. "I checked everything 3 times," replied. "The readings are accurate." A sound made them both turn around. Doctor, a scientist, had entered the lab without either of them noticing. Were tall and gray, with flat faces and black eyes that rarely showed emotion. Doctor had worked on the Serene Mind for 15 years. In all that time had never seen him smile. His species had forgotten how. But now Doctor was looking at the screen, where a golden puppy was chasing its own tail in circles, and he was making a sound that had never heard from it before. He was laughing. It started as a low rumble in his chest. Then it grew louder, shaking his whole body. Tears formed in his black eyes and ran down his gray cheeks. He laughed and laughed until he had to lean against the wall for support. "I feel it," he gasped between laughs. "I feel something. I had forgotten what it was like to feel something." Stood up. Her scientific training told her to be cautious. This could be a fluke. It could be a temporary effect that would fade quickly. It could be some kind of trick or illusion. But her heart told her something different. Her heart told her that she was looking at a miracle. She said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her, "I want every puppy recording the humans have ever made. Download their entire archive, and prepare the main conference room. I need to speak with the Research Council immediately." Nodded and began working at her console. Looked back at the screen. A small brown puppy with white spots was sleeping in a sunbeam, its paws twitching as it dreamed. She felt that strange warmth in her chest again, and she realized what it was. It was hope. For the first time in 40 cycles, she had hope. Part 2. The trials began 3 days later, had never moved so fast in her career. She gathered subjects from every species on the ship and divided them into groups. Some would watch puppy recordings. Others would watch recordings of different Earth animals. A control group would receive no treatment at all. The results came quickly, and they were astonishing. The subjects who watched puppy recordings showed immediate improvement. Their brain chemistry changed within minutes. Stress hormones dropped. Happiness chemicals increased. Beings who had not smiled in years found themselves laughing at clumsy puppies falling off furniture. Beings who had lost all interest in life started asking to see more recordings. The other animal recordings helped too, but not as much. Cats were somewhat effective. Birds were less so. Reptiles had almost no impact. There was something special about puppies specifically, something that touched the minds of sentient beings across all species barriers. Expanded the trials. She contacted research stations throughout the galaxy and asked them to test the recordings on their own populations. Within weeks, data poured in from dozens of worlds. The results were consistent everywhere. Puppy recordings reduced symptoms of void melancholy in beings from 17 different species. The crystalline minds of Theta 9 showed the most dramatic response. These beings were made of living crystal, and they processed reality through pure logic. They had always considered emotions to be errors in their programming, flaws to be corrected rather than experiences to be enjoyed. When void melancholy infected them, they could not understand what was happening. Their logical minds could not process despair, so they simply shut down, one by one, their crystal bodies going dark. But when showed them puppy recordings, something unexpected happened. The crystalline minds did not just recover from their depression. They began to experience emotions for the first time in their existence. One of them, a being called Theta 9427, described the sensation as a warmth in my core that serves no logical purpose but feels necessary for continued function. The communion of had a different reaction. These beings shared one mind across millions of bodies, connected by telepathy across vast distances. The void melancholy had broken those connections, leaving each body isolated and alone. But when they watched puppy recordings together, something remarkable occurred. The shared joy of the experience allowed them to reconnect. For the first time in decades, the communion became whole again. News of the discovery spread quickly, too quickly, soon realized. The first problem came from the pharmaceutical corporations. These massive companies had invested trillions of credits into developing treatments for void melancholy. They held patents on drugs and devices and therapeutic programs. If a simple recording could cure the disease, their investments would become worthless overnight. A delegation from the Pharmaceutical Alliance arrived on the Serene Mind 2 weeks into the trials. Their leader was a being called Director, a tall creature with silver skin and cold eyes. He came to the laboratory and examined her data with obvious displeasure. "This research must be contained," he said. "You cannot release these findings to the public." "People are dying," replied. "Entire species are fading away. I have found something that helps them. How can I keep it secret?" The economic disruption would be catastrophic. Millions of beings work in the mental health industry. They would lose their jobs. The galactic economy would suffer. The galactic population is suffering now. Director leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Doctor, you are a brilliant scientist. You could have a wonderful future with the Alliance. We would pay you very well to develop a synthetic version of this effect, something we could patent and control." Felt disgust rising in her throat. "You want me to create an artificial substitute so you can charge money for something that exists freely on a primitive planet. We want to manage the distribution responsibly." "No," said, "I will not help you profit from suffering." Director's cold eyes grew even colder. "You will regret this decision." He left the ship that day, but knew she had made a powerful enemy. The second problem came from religious groups. On many worlds, faith was a central part of culture. Different species, different gods, and followed different beliefs. When news of the puppy recording spread, religious leaders reacted in wildly different ways. Some declared the recordings to be a gift from the divine. They said that the creator of the universe had placed puppies on Earth specifically to bring joy to all sentient beings. They demanded that the recordings be treated as sacred texts and distributed through religious channels. Others had the opposite reaction. They said the recordings were a trick sent by evil forces to distract beings from true spiritual growth. They called for the recordings to be destroyed and for anyone who watched them to be punished. Debates raged on hundreds of worlds. In some places, governments banned the recordings entirely. In others, watching puppy compilations became a mandatory daily ritual. The galaxy had not been so divided since the last Great War. Through all of this chaos, continued her research. She needed to understand why the recordings worked. What was it about puppies that affected so many different types of minds? She studied the recordings carefully, analyzing every frame. She measured the movements of the puppies, the sounds they made, the expressions on their faces. She compared human puppy recordings to recordings of similar animals from other worlds. Nothing quite matched the effect. Then she noticed something interesting. The puppy recordings were not just recordings of animals. They were recordings of relationships. In almost every video, a human being appeared at some point. Sometimes the human was playing with the puppy. Sometimes the human was feeding it or holding it or simply sitting nearby. The puppies were not alone. They were loved. Realize that this was the key. It was not just the puppies themselves that created the healing effect. It was the bond between puppies and humans, the obvious, unconditional love that flowed in both directions, the pure joy that both species took in each other's presence. She looked at her data again and saw patterns she had missed before. The most effective recordings were the ones that showed the strongest emotional connections. A puppy running toward its human with wild happiness. A human laughing as a puppy licked their face. A puppy sleeping peacefully in a human's lap, completely trusting and completely safe. This was what the galaxy was missing, realized. Not just happiness, but connection. Not just joy, but love. The void melancholy was not really a disease of the brain. It was a disease of loneliness. And the humans, without knowing it, had created a cure. She called a meeting of the Research Council and presented her findings. "We cannot synthesize this effect," she said. "We cannot create it artificially. The healing power of these recordings comes from something real, something that cannot be faked or manufactured." "Then what do you suggest?" asked the council leader. Took a deep breath. She knew what she was about to say would change everything. "I suggest we contact the humans. We should establish a formal relationship with Earth. They have something the galaxy desperately needs, and we have knowledge and technology they could benefit from. It would be a fair exchange." The council erupted in argument. Some said the humans were too primitive for contact. Others said the idea was brilliant. The debate went on for hours. In the end, they voted to try. Was authorized to lead the first diplomatic mission to Earth. She stood at the window of the serene mind and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow sun, billions of humans lived their lives without any idea of what was coming. She hoped they would understand. She hoped they would help. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. Part 3. The first contact did not go smoothly. Had prepared carefully. She had studied human languages and customs. She had chosen a landing site in a remote area to avoid panic. She had even selected her team based on which species looked least frightening to human eyes. None of it mattered. When the serene mind descended through Earth's atmosphere and landed in an empty field in a region called Montana, humans reacted exactly as had expected them to react. They panicked. Military vehicles surrounded the ship within hours. Aircraft circled overhead. Satellite dishes pointed at them from every direction. Humans shouted at the ship through loudspeakers, demanding to know who they were and what they wanted. Stepped out of the ship alone, moving slowly, keeping her hands visible. She spoke in English, which she had learned from their broadcasts. "We come in peace," she said. "We need your help." The humans did not shoot her, which she considered a good start. What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history, met with leaders from many different human nations. She explained the void melancholy and its effects. She showed them the data from her research. She told them that their puppy recordings had already saved thousands of lives across the galaxy. The humans were confused, then they were skeptical, then they were amazed. "You're telling us," said one human leader, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, that videos of puppies on the internet are curing alien depression. Yes, said. The effect is consistent across 17 species. We have tested it extensively. The human leader stared at her for a long moment. Then she started to laugh. She laughed so hard that tears ran down her face. Of course it is, she said finally. Of course puppy videos are saving the galaxy. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. The negotiations took time, but the outcome was better than had hoped. The humans were remarkably willing to share their puppies with the galaxy. They seemed genuinely delighted that something so simple could help so many beings. The Universal Puppy Accord was signed 6 months after first contact. Under its terms, Earth agreed to provide a continuous supply of puppy content to the Galactic Health Coalition. Live video feeds from animal shelters, professional productions from human filmmakers, interactive holographic experiences that allowed beings on distant worlds to virtually pet puppies without ever visiting Earth. In exchange, the coalition shared technology and knowledge that advanced human civilization by centuries. Clean energy systems that ended their dependence on fossil fuels, medical treatments that cured diseases humans had struggled with for generations, communication devices that connected every person on the planet instantly. But the most popular part of the exchange was something simpler. The coalition helped humans establish puppy breeding programs specifically designed for galactic export. Living puppies, carefully chosen for their friendly temperaments, were sent to worlds throughout the galaxy as puppy ambassadors. The first puppy ambassador arrived on Theta 9 of the Crystalline Mines, exactly 1 year after the Universal Puppy Accord was signed. It was a golden retriever named Sunny, chosen for her gentle nature and boundless enthusiasm. Attended the ceremony. She watched as Sunny bounded out of the transport ship and into the crystal halls of the Theta 9 Council. The crystalline mines stood in perfect stillness, their faceted bodies glittering in the light. They were beings of pure logic, unaccustomed to anything as chaotic as a living animal. Sunny did not care about their logic. She ran up to the nearest crystalline mind, a being called Theta 9 Council Prime, and jumped up to lick his crystalline face. Her tail wagged so fast it was a blur. Theta 9 Council Prime stood frozen for a moment. Then something happened that no one had ever seen before. His crystalline body began to glow with a warm, golden light. A sound emerged from deep within his structure. It was laughter. "This unit has computed joy," he announced. "This unit finds the sensation highly agreeable. This unit requests additional puppy interaction." Sunny was happy to provide it. The Puppy Ambassador program spread rapidly. Within 5 years, there were golden retrievers on, corgis on the coalition, beagles on stations throughout deep space. Each puppy brought light to worlds that had known only darkness. Each wagging tail carried hope across the void between stars. The pharmaceutical corporations eventually adapted. Director and the Alliance found new ways to profit, creating luxury puppy experiences and premium content packages. Disapproved of their greed, but she could not deny that their distribution networks helped puppies reach more beings than the coalition could manage alone. The religious conflicts faded too. Most faith traditions eventually incorporated puppies into their beliefs, declaring them sacred creatures blessed with the divine ability to heal wounded souls. A few groups continued to resist, but they became smaller and quieter with each passing year. The void melancholy did not disappear completely. Some beings did not respond to puppy treatment. Others relapsed after initial improvement. Mental health remained a complex challenge that required many different approaches. But the galaxy was healing, slowly, imperfectly, but truly healing. Received many honors for her discovery, awards and medals and titles that would have meant everything to her younger self. But the moment that touched her most deeply came from a place she never expected. A message arrived from Earth, from a small animal shelter in a city called Portland. A group of children had learned about her work and wanted to thank her. They invited her to visit. Traveled to Earth for only the second time in her life. She landed at the shelter on a warm spring day when flowers bloomed in the garden and birdsong filled the air. The children were waiting for her, their faces bright with excitement. "Doctor," said a small girl with dark hair and missing front teeth, "we want to give you a present." The girl held out a box, took it carefully and opened the lid. Inside was a puppy. It was a Labrador mix, 8 weeks old, with brown fur and white spots on its chest. It looked up with enormous dark eyes. Its tiny tail began to wag. Had studied puppies for years. She had analyzed their every movement and sound. She had measured their effect on brain chemistry and documented their healing power. But she had never actually held one before. She lifted the puppy from the box. It was so small, so warm, so impossibly soft. It wriggled in her arms and stretched up to lick her face. Its breath smelled like milk. Its heartbeat was quick and strong against her chest. Something broke open inside. All the years of work and worry and responsibility fell away. All the weight she had carried for so long simply dissolved. She was not a famous scientist or a galactic hero. She was just a being holding a puppy, feeling pure and simple love. Tears formed in her eyes. She did not try to stop them. "What will you name her?" the little girl asked. Looked at the puppy. The puppy looked back at her with complete trust, complete acceptance, complete joy. "Hope," said, "her name is Hope." The children cheered. The puppy wagged her tail even faster, as if she approved of the name. Carried Hope out of the shelter and into the sunlight. Around her, humans went about their daily lives, walking their dogs, playing with their children, laughing with their friends. They did not know how special they were. They did not understand what a gift they had given the galaxy. But understood. She understood that the cure for the void melancholy had never really been about brain chemistry or neural pathways or psychological mechanisms. It had been about something much simpler. Love, pure, unconditional, freely given love. The humans had so much of it. They gave it to their puppies, and their puppies gave it back, and together they created something powerful enough to heal wounds across the stars. Hope licked face again and laughed. It was a sound she had not made in many, many years, but she suspected she would be making it often from now on. She looked up at the blue sky of Earth and thought about all the worlds waiting out there in the darkness. Worlds full of beings who had forgotten how to feel joy. Beings who had lost hope and love and connection. They would feel it again, all of them, one puppy at a time. The galaxy had been dying of loneliness, but the humans and their puppies were bringing it back to life. And that thought was the most beautiful thing she had ever known.